I'm Taylor, and I'm going to be talking about Task 1, our Stakeholder Workshops with Liam. Next slide. Can you go to the next slide, Evis?
Oh, I am like going to the next slide. I'm like, okay.
Oh,
gotcha.
It's not in presentation mode. We can't see that part.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my apologies. Okay.
Okay, awesome. So we held virtual stakeholder meetings from January 20th to February 3rd to collect community input on our work with the SLC Public Lands Division and our next steps to framing the concept for Reimagine Nature, Salt Lake City Public Lands Master Plan. So the analysis we created from this is instrumental in crafting a plan that reflects the needs and the values of our community. These meetings were 90 minutes long. They included a half-hour presentation on our survey results and the review of our emerging 10 big ideas, which are shown here. So it's just 5 minutes from here, from mountains to the lake, neighborhood parks Reimagine, coming soon to a park near you, SLC's Emerald Ribbon, telling our stories and our heritage, a diverse and healthy urban green space network, promoting our urban forest, connecting all our green space assets, and a biodiversity hotspot. These reviews were completed in student pairs. We listened to our stakeholder experiences and their insights. We took notes on what people said, helped clean up the transcription, and summarize what our stakeholders said. And Liam has our main takeaways and summary of our lively discussion about the future of parks and public lands in Salt Lake City.
Hi there, my name's Liam, and I'll be going over all of this fun stuff. We had two main questions. Question one, asking what the key opportunities about jumping into public lands, and the second one specifying what we can do in public lands to benefit both the economic side, the ecological side, and just making sure that everybody feels comfortable. So we had three takeaways from the meetings that we had. The first one being connectivity, second one, placemaking, community building, and equity, and the third one being green infrastructure. So the theme one being connectivity, we wanted to make sure that all of the parks are connected in some way, shape, or form, whether that being a trail that connects us from the mountains all the way down to the Great Salt Lake, to making sure that we have a constant theme throughout our parks, whether that's an urban forest or making sure that all of our greenland is kept up well and making sure that all of that is tidy and clean and everything like that. The placemaking, community building, and equity, that's making sure that everybody feels safe in our parks. We want to make sure that everybody feels like they have a place there. The first quote that we have up here, it's making sure that everybody feels like it's a community. So we want to make sure that everybody has a place, feels comfortable being where they are, and is able to go out and feel safe wherever they want to be. And then there's the green infrastructure. Looking at the green infrastructure, we want to make sure that we're incorporating plants and trees into our urban space with our city growing as well as it is. We will also want to make sure that we're well versed in making sure that we're connected to nature. So making sure that we have biodiverse spots in our city and making sure that really everything around us, we're still connecting to nature. So those were three very big key points coming from our stakeholder meetings. And kind of wrapping up that, we want to make sure that all of our parks, our green space, and our community is being able to connect in different forms and ways. And I think that the stakeholder meetings that we had and went through were a great opportunity to hear from several different people what we were trying to do, what we aspire to do, and what is possible. So it was a great opportunity.
All right, everyone. I'm Justice, and for my group members are Yi and Tadika, and we did a demographic profile of the parks within Salt Lake City. Now, as a methodology for this task, we selected 20 parks which were distributed across the city, and the distribution share for these parks were 10 within the west side of the city, and then another 10 at the eastern side of the city. So the orange painted parks are the parks that are the west, and then the green painted parks are the ones at the east. And we did the analysis based on a half-mile radius of each park that has been selected. And while the public lands division is usually focused on the parks itself, this analysis moves across the bounds of the park to look into the neighborhood character. And for comparative analysis purposes, most of the analysis focus on the differences between the west side and the east side. So for instance, in terms of the age distribution, we did find out that the distributional shares for the west side and the east side parks were almost the same. And moving to the next slide, we also find that for the aged population, which is those who are 65 years and above, the highest distribution for these people were largely found within the east side of the city against the west side too. So the next part of the analysis also looks into the income distribution. Now, without calculating the Gini index for these areas, we can clearly see from the chart here that the affluent people are mostly within the eastern side of the city. Now, the chart area colored yellow are the areas which are within the eastern side of the city, and the ash areas are the areas within the western side of the city. So that shows you the income distribution, which is tailored to the eastern side. Now, the next part of the analysis also focuses on like affordability threshold. And we know it's common knowledge that if households spend more than 30% of their income on housing, they are considered housing cost burdened. Now, the ash bars shows the households within the western parts of the city, and then the yellow bars also show the households within the eastern parts of the city. Now, it is clear that most of the households within the eastern part of the city are housing cost burdened because they spend more than 30% of their income in housing. Okay, so the next part of this analysis also basically does another affordability threshold. Now, this is more of the median rental cost against the income, which is similar to the analysis that we just did. So this also basically looks into the percentage of households who live below the level of poverty. And generally, we found that the households within the western part of the city, there are about 16% of households within the western part of the city who fall below the family income poverty level. And then just a little bit above 6% of households within the eastern part of the city also fall below the poverty level.
So let's talk about the transportation condition in that area. In 6 out of all the parks here has less than 1% people who usually walk. Best walk sports are mostly in western parks, for instance, like Poplar Grove Park. Parks in east side of the city has more people who use bike to work. Reasons for not using bike in west side can be identified as absence of cyclist lane, poor cycling and street environment, and absence of proper signage in the area. So now let's talk about the transit score. East side parks represent city's transit score. However, west side parks have more fluctuations with while comparing with the Salt Lake City. Poplar Grove Park has the best transit score, and parks with less transit score have bus stops or track stations which are from the park.
Think that we lost you there for a minute, Sadika, so I wasn't sure if you're going to the next slide.
Demographic analysis, we have some recommendations too. Most of the parks have rental occupied housing units mostly. Affordable housing is not available in mostly populated parks, for instance, Poplar Park. So more attention is required to enhance housing affordability in parks in both sides of the city. Parking facilities are to be increased in both sides of the city. Some parks have bus stops that are far, so no bus stops can be established nearby to enhance the facility. For instance, like in Joseph F. Steinberg Park. Westside parks need more attention to increase walkability. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you for the two teams that went before. So we're the Park Equity Audit team, and I just want to double check. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we were tasked with synthesizing, sorry, it's a combination of myself, Che, and Virgil. We all make up this team, and we were tasked to synthesize and analyze the data that we collected from the comprehensive park audit that we did as a class for all the Salt Lake City parks that we identified. You can go to the next slide now. Perfect. So the park equity audit tool that we used in this workshop was based on the community park audit tool, which was developed in 2010 in Kansas City, Missouri by Kansas State University and the University of Missouri. And the original tool contains 4 sections, which includes park information, park access within and outside of the park, including the surrounding neighborhood, park activity areas, and then finally park quality and safety. So the class as a whole audited 20 parks in total, 10 on each side of the city, and the audits were conducted 2 to 3 times for each park to achieve more accurate data. And we were able to employ this tool to holistically audit the community parks across the city to understand the current status of the parks, and then also be able to better understand the perception of some Westside residents that mentioned during the first window of engagement with Reimagine Nature that the Westside parks were of less quality. So we wanted to explore this perception further by quantifying typically qualitative park experiences to better inform some measurable benchmarks for park equity to be included in the 20-year Salt Lake City Public Lands Master Plan. So I will pass it on to Virgil.
Yeah, so kind of like Claudia was saying, the scores for each park was found by the students that went out and audited each park, and the score for each park was added or was found by adding up the different sections from the park equity audit tool. From the map, you can tell some parks are a lot bigger. So in order to control for that size, we divided certain sections by acreage so we could account for that and kind of control for that. And then those scores were assigned to each park in order to analyze the east versus the west. And then the map that you see on the slide now, that was created to visualize the different scores that each park had. So each park was assigned a color depending on their score, and then the darker colors show higher scores, and the lighter colors show lower scores. And I'll move it on to Jay.
All right, so here we have basically a comparison of the east and the west side. We have the 2 different sets of scores for the parks, and you can see they're ordered from highest to lowest. And we have the 2 different totals. So on the east side, the total was 518.1 points, and on the west side, there was 368 points total for all of the parks, and which is a pretty stark contrast in, you know, that total pointage, because that really shows the difference between the 2 sides, that there is a lacking a bit on the west side for the audits. The common themes were basically for park information and wayfinding is almost all of the parks had signage. They had a map or something indicating the hours and the rules, except for Jake Garn Park. That was the one park that did not, that didn't have anything from the students who audited that. As for park access, all the parks did really well on that point. Multiple ways of entry. There was ways to get in via sidewalk. There's some ways to get in via bike trails. Safety overall was the #1 category that was really only negative, and it wasn't anything that was too serious. It was mostly just about general litter, poor lighting, and heavy vehicle traffic. As for quality and activity areas, this was varied quite a bit, and mostly due to the size of the parks. You know, one park that's 7 acres isn't going to have the same thing as a park that's only a quarter of an acre, but they all did pretty well. And then as for placemaking and park aesthetic features, the Westside parks actually scored quite higher in this area, mostly because of their landscaping and vegetation. However, they didn't have as much cultural representation or artistic features as the Eastside parks did. And you can go to the next slide. And then here we have a graph comparing the two. So you can see visually basically where they line up. And there was some parks that did well. So if you look on the west side, the 900 South River Park did quite well. However, the reason that its score was a bit lower overall was because of that negative portion of safety. But looking at this, the graphs look semi-equal. However, the top numbers on the two, the west side, it goes to 60, and then on the east side, that top number is 100. So the scales are quite different. And the graph is split up into basically the different sections, the different categories that the parks were audited on. And the city has taken a look at this, and we spoke with Nancy about it. And looking at Talfer Park, that wasn't something that the city, or wasn't a park the city was very interested in. However, it scored quite well, and mostly due to the trees and the plants were all wonderful parts of the park. And looking at that, thinking of maybe instead of remaking the whole park, we could use that as a model to just enhance what's there, because obviously it did quite well. And it's hard also because of the gigantic size difference for each of the parks. You know, it's hard to compare one against the other. But with this audit, at least enabled some sort of standard that can be looked at and then used to compare sizes of similar parks.
Perfect, thanks, Che. So based on all the data that we were able to compile and analyze a little further, we did come up with 3 large kind of broad vision recommendations. And the first of the 3 includes establishing long-term park equity audit mechanisms. So basically trying to incorporate a more consistent way of measuring the progress and the benchmarks of the public land development and maintenance. So this could be having quarterly regular audits and making sure that the results are available to the public. And this could also be a report that goes out to key stakeholders, such as friends of groups or different community coalitions that have a deep connection to the parks. And then number 2, exploring some investment opportunities for the low scoring parks. So particularly the 3 parks that Che was mentioning to be in that bottom tier. And we recommend that prioritizing of investments be considered here. And it really should establish some improvement for both East and West Side parks in need, but a little bit more research I think is needed to determine exactly how much of financial investment is needed. But again, just amplifying the existing quality that's there and trying to build some bridges over the gaps in terms of historical and kind of cultural resonance, specifically on the West Side. And then for our last recommendation, establishing some citywide park equity standards. And it's kind of incumbent on city staff and stakeholders to engage in conversations about how to define equity for public lands, and then attach some quantifiable standards to those definitions. So using some of the information that we gathered from the park equity audit, using that as a baseline for sure, and then going beyond that and trying to determine some action items that can be operationalized into the future. And we did want to address some of the bias in the data. This wasn't a perfect analysis just because of the varying times of day that we all went to audit the parks, our kind of newness in auditing. I know that's a skill that takes a while to kind of polish up, but there are all these different concerns and kind of limitations in data still, don't invalidate the findings that we have, just because it really was to kind of investigate some of those perceptions that we received in that first window of engagement to better understand exactly what the quality or the state of quality of parks were on the West Side, and how to continue to center the needs of communities and the desires to make parks a little bit more accessible, programming and activated in their spaces. So that is kind of essentially the recommendations that we have. And overall, excited to see where this information can be used in the future.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Brandon, and my group consists of myself, Chimali, and Austin, and I'm going to talk about the placemaking workshops that we did as a class back in March. These workshops were designed mostly to get some very direct feedback directly from community members on both general park equity topics and concerns, as well as some of the activities we had planned for our April 24th Earth Day event at Poplar Grove Park. So next slide. All right, so the first workshop we held was back on March 17th, and we invited James Rojas, who is an urban planner based out of Los Angeles, to help us facilitate an activity called Place It, which involves using these little trinkets and small items that you find either around your house if you're participating virtually, or from a bag of items you're given if you're participating in person. This was a hybrid event, by the way, and there were 31 people that showed up, and they were able to use these items to visualize their answers to questions like, what does an equitable park look like to you? And so it's a way to get input without actually like forcing people to necessarily like talk a lot. It's a really interesting activity. And so next slide, please. Then we had 3 workshops that were facilitated by different groups from the class. So the second workshop was facilitated by the litter cleanup and general interventions group, and this was on March 24th. They were able to get 12 people to attend, and they got some really great discussion going with community members, public land staff, and a representative from the local community council on topics like litter cleanup, general stuff, and tabling opportunities for the Earth Day event. So this was a 100% virtual event, and they got some really great info from this. Next slide. Our third workshop was held by the Wayfinding and Paint the Pavement group on March 26th. There were 11 attendees at this event, and this group was able to meet with community members to get some really good input on a mural that we had planned to paint on an empty concrete slab in the park, as well as some concrete slabs in 9th South River Park. And then we also got some community input on some wayfinding ideas that we had for areas surrounding the park, as well as a section of the Jordan River Trail that ran from approximately Poplar Grove Park down to the 9-line trail. And then the tree planting and Pollinator Garden workshop was the last one that we held on the 27th of March. That was a Saturday, I believe. And there were 15 attendees at this one. And this group was able to get some really great conversation going as far as what types of trees and flowers to plant, where to plant them, as well as getting some input on the possibility of setting up a Friends of Poplar Grove Park group, which would just basically advocate for Poplar Grove Park similarly to like Friends of Sugar House Park or Friends of Liberty Park groups, which are existing groups.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right slide, Brandon.
It is. I believe Chimali was supposed to present this one. I'm not sure if he's here or not.
But I can take over the.
We cannot really hear you. I can present if needed, Chimali.
Am I sitting out?
Okay, I guess I'll just try to talk about this. Our participants basically, each group in the class who hosted one of these events invited people to attend their events, because we had been reaching out to people in the community for other things prior to these. And so we ended up having 2 virtual events, the Place It workshop and the general placemaking and litter workshop, and then 2 in-person events, which were held at Poplar Grove Park, and those were the Wayfinding and Paint the Pavement events and the tree planting and Pollinator Garden event. In all the events, the groups facilitated different activities and got discussion going. There were also note takers in every group and people who documented things with photos as well. And so the goal, again, as I said earlier, was just to get participants genuine and direct thoughts about different placemaking opportunities and activities for the Earth Day event.
Hey, can y'all hear me a little bit better this time?
Yes. Yeah. Do you want to
Yes.
you want to
Yeah, I
take
can
it
take
from here?
over. Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Really appreciate that. So the placemaking workshops have been instrumental in giving us an insight into what the community desires. Firstly, from the Place It workshops, we had participants share their favorite memory, kind of to order to better understand what creates a meaningful experience and one that sticks with you really. And we found that over 80% of participants associated natural elements and family connections with their shared given memory. These natural elements can include things like trees, grass, water features, flowers, and so on. And other important attributes that were often shared in these memories included inclusive accessibility, common park infrastructure, and cultural and artistic components that kind of made an impact on that memory. And then for the, the general and litter cleanup workshop showed us a desire for organizations to really get involved and participate. These park spaces can be further used to further essential equity conversations. For example, like the Heartland Community for Youth and Families organization uses public parks and sports in order to promote higher education for underserved and at-risk youth. And so while their mission is not directly related to parks, these parks help facilitate this mission and many others. And from the Wayfinding and Paint the Pavement workshop, they found that community members really wanted to maximize the opportunities for feedback and collaboration. Maximizing the collaboration with the local community will aid in the mission for equitable and accessible parks, which can reflect the community's values and identity. This is a really important aspect of our findings. And having a space in which reflects your identity can truly help in making this place feel more like your community. Next slide, please. So our recommendations based on the key findings from our workshops. Firstly, of course, just increasing awareness and outreach is so vital for community engagement. For some workshops, there are really low levels of participants, so more outreach should of course occur. And if at all possible, provide some incentive for participation. And also possibly partnering with other CMP courses to bolster engagement could be a viable option. Leveraging the Place It workshop is essential. This is a really, really good tool for seeing what the community wants. And while this pandemic has limited in-person meetings, the use of it during in-person meetings when deemed safe to do so would be optimal. However, as that's not currently possible, providing kits to participants for online meetings would also be helpful in order to kind of prevent participants from scrambling around their household, just trying for certain items, as this would make the ease of participation a lot better. And intergroup collaboration between all three groups, this could have made the final Earth Day event flow a lot easier and most likely have helped volunteers engage with each other a little bit more. And finally, allowing students to designate themselves to certain roles could help facilitate accurate skill matching and increase the overall participation levels with this project, as this could create a deeper and meaningful connection to the project, rather than it just being kind of viewed as a class project. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Dakota, and today I'll be presenting with Amy on task 5, which was writing a grant application. And Dr. Ibis raised a total of $4,000 for the Westside studio to implement projects. She believes that although planning reports are nice, plans can take a lot of time, potentially years, to become reality. So the Westside studio is committed to always leaving a physical mark in the community. In our case, it was through placemaking events such as cleaning up trash, wayfinding through art, as well as planting flowering trees and a pollinator garden. Next slide, please.
Actually, could you go back to the other slide? Okay, perfect. So we made these things possible thanks to the people that funded us. We received $1,000 from the Benyon Center, which is a community engagement hub at the University of Utah. Their mission is to inspire and mobilize people to strengthen communities through learning, scholarship, and advocacy. Next up, we received $1,000 from Arts, Culture, and Events Fund, or ACE funding for short. This is a Salt Lake funding that is available in the form of mini grants to the community, and it's also a funding opportunity administered by the mayor's office to promote and support neighborhood and community events in Salt Lake City. Lastly, our largest fund was through the University Neighborhood Partners, whose mission is to bring together University and Westside people and resources in a reciprocal learning, action, and benefit, a community basically coming together. They gave us $2,000 for this class and our projects this semester, and are also a Westside Studio long-term partner. Every year they help this class be able to implement community projects that are of value and also engage residents in decision-making processes of how projects will end up looking like in their neighborhoods. Next slide.
So learning objectives. The learning objective from task 4, which was writing a mini grant for the professor, involved writing a statement of need / rationale for implementing strategies, to describe outcomes, and to develop a budget where we would buy materials and document how much our materials would cost. And we needed to come up with matching funds. So we needed to find people who would donate their time or materials or their expertise towards the project, and either match the amount of funds that we were requesting or exceed the amounts that we were requesting. And we needed to ask organizations for support letters as well. And we needed to describe how we involved the community in the decision-making process and what we were going to spend our funding on specifically. Next slide.
So some of the big budget items, to give an idea of these items, we kind of separated it by team. So the first team paid an artist called Miriam Gutierrez $1,000. She is the owner of Art by Mermacida, and she dedicated hours and hours to this project. And then, as you can see in the picture to the left is a drone picture of her working on it, which she did dedicate lots of time on. She also included materials and volunteers for this event. So we're very, very grateful for that. And then next up was hiring Michaela Caters, which is owned by Chef Rudy Salvatore, who brings Haiti cuisine to Utah. So this cost $956. We wanted to hire people of color and or from the West Side, so they were our best option, and we we're very, very grateful for them. Lastly, we paid Tree Utah $759 for 6 trees, which included cherry trees, 1 box elder, and a honeysuckle tree. For example, our partnership with Tree Utah brought technical expertise, tools, and even additional trees. So this was only a fraction of the investment put into this park. Next slide.
So these are our matching funds, and we received $1,000 worth of materials from Tree Utah, $500 from Utah Arts Alliance, and $500 from Dr. Evis Garcia and the CMP department. And in terms of volunteer hours, we got approximately worth $4,800 of volunteer hours from people with technical assistance, $2,520 from volunteers, and approximately $5,520 in student volunteer hours. Next slide, please.
So the total cost of the projects and everything included with volunteer work and then actual monetary work is about $4,000 of direct cost that we had. Then we had about 14,840 matching funds, which is almost 4 times the original cost of the direct cost, which makes the total investment about $18,840 for the entire projects.
Okay. Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi. So, Andrew and I, Jasmine, will be doing task 6, which is Reimagine Outreach. We'll be presenting that. So, next slide, please. So what is Reimagine Outreach? So that would be the sixth task of the Salt Lake City Public Lands Master Plan. And it's also a series of education and outreach opportunities to reach with Salt Lake City residents about the parks they visit. And what we did was that we visited over 20 parks, businesses, and organizations to spread the word about the survey and about the Earth Day event. And just to mention, the survey materials and the flyers are both in English and Spanish. Next slide. So the overview of this is that 23 students, which is our class, were enrolled in the workshop to help Salt Lake City staff with community outreach. So students were basically assigned with like tasks to intercept and engage with the general public to like get ideas and feedback about the surveys. And also we visited like various sites throughout the city with the staff to distribute flyers, postcards, door hangers, and posters that advertise the survey for the Public Lands Master Plan. And we also like visited places either by ourselves or with like impaired groups to sometimes with the same parks, and with businesses. So thank you. And overall, the outreach distributed a total of this many postcards, 1,380, 230 Reimagine posters, 230 Earth Day event posters, and 920 flyers for the event, and many others. So that totals up to like 3,490 potential points of contact. Next slide, please. And this just talks about like the flyers, the big posters that we distributed for the survey and for the Earth Day event, as well as the postcards and flyers that we did for like businesses and parks. Next slide, please. So the summary of our outreach was that we did like we chose 3 ways to engage with the general public. One was public internship locations, the other was organizational and establishment outreach locations, and the third one was social media engagement. Together, the 3 of them will allow for so the 3 of them together will end up helping us reach to the general public to do the surveys. And as for the total, we will know like at May 9th when the survey closes. So next slide, please. Okay, so talking about the summary of the outreach, the public internship, which is the students like engaging with the staff on 38 different public places. So this outreach like involved the parks, the libraries, open spaces, trails, and any other areas. So in total, the students and staff were able to distribute a total of 467 flyers and 593 postcards. Next slide, please. And this slide, the organizational and establishment locations, talks about the number of establishments, which were 94 that we have visited, and include the following, such as grocery stores, nonprofit organizations, coffee shops, laundromats, apartment complexes, public service organizations, and restaurants. So in total, we were able to distribute 95 Reimagine posters and 82 postcards from visiting these establishments. Next slide, please. And the third part of the outreach summary is our social media. And from the looks of it, it seems that Facebook was a primary social media platform used for the outreach. And in total, for all the other platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and of course, Facebook, we were able to do over 84 posts were distributed. And there were over 126 likes for this post and 20 plus comments and 18 plus shares for reaching out to the community about the survey and the Earth Day event. So in total, the social media efforts reached around 318,609 people. So yeah, that's about Reimagine Outreach. Thank you.
Do you want to use these slides, Morgan, or?
Yeah, Anissa was able to put in the rest.
Great.
So awesome. Okay, so my name is Morgan. My partner is Anissa, and we would like to share a brief summary of the event, of the Earth Day event. Our team for this event includes both instructors and students from the Westside studio, along with our partners from Salt Lake City Public Lands Division. So the idea for this event was based on 3 interventions to improve and revitalize parks on the west side of Salt Lake City and to help support and recognize the West Side communities. These interventions were informed by stakeholder meetings, community engagement, and survey targeted to the West Side. Then interventions include wayfinding, Pollinator Garden and tree planting, and general placemaking and cleanup. So for the wayfinding, about 35 participants helped us paint the border of the Poplar Grove Park mural. This mural was created by Miriam Gutierrez to reflect the Poplar Grove and Glendale communities. It's an abstract map of the 2 neighborhoods. This border design was carried, next slide, please. So this border design was carried through to 9th South River Park in the orb-like features on the sidewalk pavement. Kevin Cash helped us with this design, but to connect both parks, we also installed wayfinding along the Jordan River Parkway Trail and at various bus stops that included stencils of trail locations and park locations, as well as some bus stop locations and cute little fishes as well. Awesome, next slide. Okay, so for the Pollinator Garden, on the day of the event, there were 14 volunteers to help plant 37 flowering perennials at the Poplar Grove Park. A few days before this, there were 5 flowering trees planted and 5 non-flowering trees planted. The idea behind the Pollinator Garden and the trees was to help support the ecosystem in the park and bring life to the park in general. For general placemaking, over 100 gallons of trash were collected from around the 2 parks during the event by about 15 volunteers. The general placemaking also set up a raffle to give away various merchandise from local businesses. It also hosted a local Haitian food truck to give out food in exchange for survey vouchers, which many people took the surveys or took the Reimagine Nature survey that day. We also had 14 organizations set up at 14 different booths to give out information to the public. Now I will pass it on to Anissa.
Hi, Anissa.
I can also continue on if Anissa is having trouble connecting.
I think she's connecting again. Sorry. Let me see.
Sorry, yeah, it disconnected me.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can hear you now. You can go ahead.
Okay,
Anissa.
so in the participant, we included a sticky wall that prompted individuals to write down their ideas. 30 participants answered with ideas such as engagement, clean water, community, and diversity in language. Another activity involved 10 cups. Each had a theme from 10 transformative projects. The participants had to put a bean in the cup to demonstrate what they prioritized. Most popular cup was cup 5, which had 9 beans, and cup 8 had 6 beans. The least popular being cup 1 and cup number 3 had 1 bean each. So the other activity we had was place it, which engaged participants to be letting them, build their ideal park with household objects like crafts, supplies, and paper to write down what they designed. At least 8 people partook in this activity. 4 of those people wrote on the paper, which said more community events, concert, etc. Increases hangout areas, recycled, and dog cleanup stations. Another person said dream park, which describes as lots of forestry, more water areas, natural and play spots. Another person said bat houses, more flowers and benches. And another person said there should be more trees, signs, which identify, what kind of trees there are. And last person said slides, merry-go-rounds, and trails for parks, a theater, toddler mazes, and webs to climb up flowers.
We also want to recognize our sponsors. I know that in other presentations they were also recognized, but we have sponsors for funding as well as material donations and volunteer donations, and a bunch of organizations that help support and were at the event. We're all grateful for these people. So thank you very much.
Right, excellent. Great works. I'm going to stop recording now.